Let's call her Lynn, and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been fairly normal, and never once did I notice any weird behaviors or red flags. Until recently. I can't stress enough just how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like to watch horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew just how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't even into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But what's so strange about this is it's just so unlike her. I should also add that she's never had any mental health issues, as far as I'm aware, and it does not run in her family. I know that some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I would have realized at some point. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen by myself, making some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and knew I wouldn't be able to make it to my usual Dunkin' Donuts spot for my morning fix. I took a sip of coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner right of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind a corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips though. "Geez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry out towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird and totally out of character for her, like I said. But I also found it kind of funny that she was being a little more playful and a little less serious. I showed her that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was really odd, but it certainly wasn't something I should call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was being her normal self. I didn't bring it up either, and neither did she. And life just went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m. I had woken up to get a drink, and I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back at me. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like the Cheshire cat. I screamed. I'll admit it, not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason at that moment, I was terrified. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards and out of view, her hands and feet smacking on the tile floor as she hurried back out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood there, frozen in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little while longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. And when I got to the bedroom, our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing, to make sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got in bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep as I started to wonder if I dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing a mug and kissing her on the cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "What the fuck was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over the cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me from over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she bursted out laughing. She kept laughing and laughing and laughed so hard I just couldn't help but join her. You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that? I said. She giggled at me and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her hands around my neck. You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even, she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love for all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out at me from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might have not known she was even in there at all had the old trunk's hinges not given it away. She had the lid propped up just enough so that her face only peeked halfway through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't even answer. She just slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. And I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of this eventually. Lynn didn't peek at me for 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said to her I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her little spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she peeking at me when I wasn't looking, and I just didn't notice? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking over my shoulder, whether she was watching me from around the corner or behind a door. I was jumping in my own home, and when she wasn't in full view of me, I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to her friend's house, and I lounged on the couch to play a couple games on the laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling, like I was being watched. So I slowly opened my eyes, and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking at me from behind the shower curtain. Her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside, her long dark hair against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hasn't blinked for hours. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was scared out of my fucking mind. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us moving. She slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards through the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't gonna put up with some crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I placed myself in the bathroom, stopping to listen to the door every few minutes. Suddenly I heard a muffled sound, and I peered my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I suddenly felt an urge of anger. I was acting like such a coward. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was some joke, it's a shitty one. What the hell, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really goddamn annoying. I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk. But instead I heard her faint moan. So quiet, I wondered if I heard it at all. And then complete silence. Lynn, I called out. I swear to God, just fucking stop it, I yelled, pounding my fist at the door. I waited for her to cuss me out. Something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before, but there was nothing. Just an occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny I was really scared. Too afraid to open the damn door. Face my own wife. I waited 30 minutes or so, which feels like a lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully it didn't. I could see straight away down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see if her head would pop up over the top step, but never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally preparing myself to open it. I slowly turned the knob with shaky fingers, and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that made me still and feel nauseous when I still think about it. Alone, awful, or louder than I've ever heard. But this time I was able to tell where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion. I locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the side gap. Her eyes were still as wide as ever, and her mouth was just hanging open in the most grotesque, gaping smile I've ever seen. I didn't even scream, I was too scared for that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow, I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could, all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear his shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't stop running. I didn't hear it get closer, but I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house as fast as I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or cold, maybe a little bit of both. I hadn't even grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. That's gonna be the end of part 1 of this story. If you enjoyed my reading, please let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, like and subscribe, and stay tuned on King Crunch's channel.